Hey Gemini, welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that you're here. Oh boy, Gemini. This is your astrology forecast for the second lunar quarter. So we're looking at the first quarter moon on Sunday, January 9th, and leading up to a Cancer full moon on the 17th of January, 2022. 2022. Oh my God. Welcome, Gemini. Thank you for being here, and welcome back if you are a subscriber. Thank you so much for your patronage. And if you're new here, thanks for checking us out. And this is going to give some insight into the particular Gemini things that are going to be relevant, at least in this lunar quarter. And really, it always is an opportunity to go back and look at the beginning of the new moon and reflect back on those intentions as we are preparing for a culmination point with a full moon. So we're looking at Gemini rising, Gemini moon, Gemini sun. And if you haven't looked at or checked out the video for the general astrology for the week, you can do that on YouTube by linking at the end of this video, or you can just scroll down on BitChute and find the weekly astrology report for the second lunar quarter and the full moon in Cancer. And that's just going to go over a lot of the transits themselves and get into the specifics of the transits. This is just going to look at Gemini. How is this likely going to impact you through the course of this week? So first quarter moon, third quarter moon, these quarter moons always represent some sort of crisis moment, right? We set some intentions with the new moon. It's fresh. We have all of the potential in front of us for growth and activation, and we set intentions, and this is our first roadblock, right? The first quarter moon, specifically for Gemini, in the 11th house in Aries, squaring the sun in the 8th house. So Gemini, the real general theme here is, if we look at this chart, what we're going to find here is that everything right now, including the north node of the moon, is really situated in the top of the chart, which means that it has a lot to do with the relationship of the individual with other in any context you can think of. And the only thing that's really going to be primarily in this area, other than the moon in her regular transits, in the near future, is going to be the south node in Scorpio, dipping into the 6th house. So and Lilith is going to do an oscillation, right? And will move retrograde and then back direct. But and so will also be making her journey through the bottom of the Gemini chart. So, but for the most part, it's really situated at the top of the chart. And the general theme that really came forward for Gemini, at least in this week, and certainly I think for the whole lunar cycle, because the new moon did start in the 8th house. And as a Gemini person, the distinct dialectic or duality that is embedded in the personality is going to be put to the test, I think, because truly Gemini is now being invited to consider one last time, really, what needs to be expressed with Lilith here in the 1st house, and emerge about the self that the Gemini person really has been the patron or poster child of in terms of our collective soul journey, because the North Node has been in Gemini for the past 18 months. So the very nature of the Gemini person has been kind of on up front for everybody in terms of where we're all being pulled to at a soul evolutionary level, which is what the North Node represents. It's the head of the dragon. It pulls us towards that which is going to allow us to evolve at a soul level. So there's something, one last time, Gemini, that you at this moment get to allow this part, whatever parts of yourself that finally need to be, that need to surface, to reveal themselves, aspects about Lilith that typically we will suppress, or the stigma of it, or we'll feel ashamed of it because it's primal, it's self-preservation, and truly it is the original blueprint of the divine feminine, at least here on this planet. And so There's a lot of, there's a demand to be heard with Black Moon Lilith, and something deeper than even our own individual subconscious, our connection to the planet and the divine feminine in essence. And so, Gemini, you are truly going to be stepping into a cycle now where you are giving of yourself. You're going to give over to the other side of who you are, as evidenced by so much as at the top of the chart here. So Lilith is really speaking to me for you, Gemini, in terms of there's a trine with Saturn that's in Aquarius. Your chart ruler is Mercury, is going to station retrograde this week in Aquarius, no less. So there's some stability and an incredible amount of objective and pattern-oriented thinking right now. Something and just the real driving force for the Gemini chart being Mercury in the realm of abstract concepts and belief systems and larger perspectives and understanding. So the Gemini person, I think, has a lot of stability, perhaps a little bit too much in the realm of the mind, which will be put to the test when Mercury stations retrograde. There'll be some review period for that which came through so clearly this week as Mercury has gone through just the first, few degrees of Aquarius. But there's something about the stability in the belief systems and the larger understanding for the Gemini person that is anchoring you as an individual Gemini to allow whatever Lilith is, that part of ourselves that we often don't want to allow, because it's almost animalistic and it's primal and it demands to be seen and heard. It's about you as a person, because whatever's left, right? Because whatever's left is what is going into the cauldron, so to speak, the offering to the other side of you, because that's really the area of the 8th house and what is produced in those relationships that is really going through a massive overhaul, especially Pluto being here for many, many years, and then the Sun and Venus coming together on the 8th as well in a square to this moon in the 11th house. So it's a tenuous area for Gemini. I think there's a lot of feels for the Gemini in terms of the collective's shadow, and not so much in a spiritual sense, but in a very clear what it is as it is now, right? The collective consciousness, where the global collective of humanity is currently residing, and for the Gemini person, where they are, their social environment, what it's made of. And I think with the moon here right now and in a square to the sun, there is a re-emergence and a sensitivity to the wounds of the social organism as a whole, and the victim savior dynamic that is still active in the social setting of the Gemini person right now. And the moon meeting that is over the weekend, and then the 9th of the square is just, there's a lot of feels and a lot of shame and guilt about the society in general, and just getting more sensitive and amplified with the moon here, and in a square to the sun, right, with Venus here in the 8th house. I mean, there's been a deep inventory and certainly a metamorphosis at play with Pluto in your 8th house, but definitely with the Sun and the Venus retrograde, and the fact that they met each other on the 8th. I mean, this is a very... it may not be fully realized in the ego or the conscious expression, but Venus allowed it to feel it in our bodies, in our relationships with people, in the essence of life that is meaningful to us. And for the Gemini person, this is in terms of what is being produced resource-wise, because this is, in fact, the main theme, along with the giving over, Gemini, is that this full moon that we're leading up to, because the moon will be in Cancer, is really along the axis of your resources, your inherent resources, and what you create in relation to other. And it's really in this realm of what you're creating in your relationships, be it business resources, the resources in a marriage, the sexual resources in in a sexual relationship. Any kind of intimacy or trust is something that is created in a binding agreement. And so that is its own type of production or its own type of resource. And it's the power dynamics that we discover that's also created. This is where ritual and the occult and what goes on in our subconscious, because that is really the power of creative manifestation, is what's in our subconscious. And it's through our relationships that we discover that. And so for the Gemini person, just in general, there is right now with Capricorn and Pluto involved, it's an overhaul, right? It's a metamorphosis of the shadow. And so part of that right now that is happening is certainly, I think it's really, I feel like it's poking the bear even more about like the shame and the guilt and just all the sensitive feels at the moment about the collective and the nature of society in general and the wounds of the society and the way that society acts out its wounds, and just feeling right into that, and how that I feel like triggers a lot of really deep consideration, but also some wisdom and some patience around how individually we come at our relationships and are part of producing what ends up being the case in society. And the Gemini person, there's something profoundly significant about you as a person that represents the way that how cohesive it really is when we come together and create from that well of emotion, right? The 8th house is Scorpio, and Scorpio's fixed earth. So Gemini, it's really about knowing where your resources are and how you're using them to eventually create more resources or invest in some way, because that's what the 8th house is. And that's the area that is getting a lot of deep reconsideration and ultimately a cathartic moment with the full moon, because the moon will meet Pluto in this 8th house. This is Pluto in the 8th house, and then the sun. I mean, this is incredibly cathartic and potentially very destructive if there's not an awareness of this, because this is in one of the most dark places of the zodiac in the 8th house. This is the abyss, right? And in a square at first to this moon in Aries, but ultimately it's going to be opposite the moon in the 2nd house. Do your actual material resource of who you are, right? And not even who you are, but what surrounds you, right? This is literally your resources, physically and materially, your genetic resources, your any of your assets, your inheritance, anything that you can identify as yours that has value, like real value and inherent meaning. Is that value going? And the moon is happy in a 2nd house. And so the Gemini person is really going to get a pretty strong sense if their material reality is capable of supporting and creating their emotional security. And it's going to be shown by this cathartic moment in this 8th house realm for the Gemini person, in terms of, are the resources created in your relationship, if the structure of that is destroyed in some way by some force, will your emotional security still be maintained with what has inherent value just because of what is, right? Because there is always the potential to change. And this is why the Gemini person in general is so important in this particular aspect, because it's going to be the ability to span the dialectic of yourself and understand the multifaceted nature of who you are, in order to really manage maybe some serious triggering that I think that between Aries and Capricorn normally is a square, but for Gemini it just feels like it could really just bring up a lot of uncomfortable feelings about how one has been part of creating the very thing that we're just like, but also incredible release, incredible psychological release and transformation when the sun meets Pluto. So it may not be nearly as disruptive, and maybe it'll be something that the Gemini person has already been so ready to let go of, and is just going to be like, yes, finally, I am ready to give that over because that dynamic is done. And again, I think a lot of this too is Mercury and Saturn here in the ninth house, really stabilizing a strong, broad perspective and understanding, especially with your chart ruler of Mercury. Now, the retrograde is going to give the Gemini person some time to process and proofread and go back over some pretty strong insights into understanding and meaning. The outlet, I think, the best for all of us, we're seeing this incredible outlet with Mars and Sagittarius. And even though there may be a sense of how do I feel into this and have a sensitivity to the social world without being attached to it, I think that and how to let go of that and still feel like myself within the social order. Mars being the ruler of Aries is like an outlet, and it's specifically an outlet that circles back. It's like a circuitry that is meant to come back and procure what we have learned through the journey of Mars and Sagittarius, which has been really acting in a very courageous and maybe impulsive way, but certainly outputting in terms of meaning and justice and the bigger picture of things, and acting, putting our own personal energy and action into that meaning. And so for the Gemini person, it's going to be in your interpersonal relationships. So even if there is a sense of kind of how do I not get fully engaged in the social scene in general, or feeling too much into it, how do I release this energy? By actually learning something and gathering back in what you've learned about yourself and your relationships. And when you do that, it'll allow, I think, for an outlet for this really powerful and very fiery and possibly like temper flaring type of experience with the moon in Aries. So Gemini, because it's so easy to just kind of take yourself out of the social situation and just see it for what it is without being emotionally attached. And it's a little harder when the moon is here. So this is the perfect outlet. It's just like, hey, we learn so much about who we are in our interpersonal relationships. So we might be having some uncomfortable experiences with the nature of society and how we have to really take some deep stock and be very patient and wise and really feel into what is it that I am participating in creating through my own energy, my own subconscious energy, what needs to be released. And I think just putting that output energy into learning and gathering back in what we've learned about the meaning of relationships, and especially for Gemini, the meaning of relationships for yourself, who you are and what they mean to you. That's a great outlet. So as we move forward, because there's just, are you ready to give yourself over, right? Are your resources, like I said, is your material reality able to hold your emotional security when the production that you have participated in finds this cathartic moment? So there's a couple interesting things that come along with Neptune, right? Neptune in your 10th house. I mean, your mission has been very spiritually based, very humanitarian, very broad for a number of years. And I think it's made it very difficult up until recently when Jupiter's come into the 10th house that you're able to manage this in some way. Especially because Jupiter will also rule your 7th house of who you are in your relationships. So I think that your mission is really starting to come online in a way that you can at least start to take some action on with Jupiter, or certainly have a much more expansive vision of. So if we go let's see, if we go a couple days forward, we're going to see that Mars almost immediately comes into a square with Neptune after having that really profound kind of like, yes, I'm going to just like gather in everything I've learned, and I'm going to, there could be a real, I don't want to even call it a burst, just like a really strong surge of emotional energy that can be outputted towards gathering in everything that we have come to understand about relationships and meaning for the Gemini person, but almost immediately is challenged by Neptune in Pisces, which is, it's less about the meaning of it, and the mission is more about the experience of it all together, which is a different experience entirely, which is why it's in a square to Sagittarius. This is all of the abstraction and symbols and the ritual itself and acting it out and the ceremony and such. That's Sagittarius, the big picture and like the doctrine and stuff. Pisces is like you take the DMT and you're shot off into the ether, right? You're fully engaged in the field of consciousness. And this, for the Gemini person, they've really brought that really broad, humanitarian, transcendental perspective to their mission, which has been very nebulous. And like I said, it's only been recently that Jupiter is now entered and will be here for a while. So, but you can fake it till you make it, even if you know where you're headed in terms of who you are in relationships. But the power and dissolving power of Neptune in your 10th house is going to dissolve that almost as quickly as you put on the mask, right? You can act out the ceremony all day, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just know that you're going to meet resistance and really just find being like dissolved or tampered in some way by a much broader, much more transcendental, much more spiritual mission, right? That is going to just like, just kind of douse your fire a little bit. And it's not all bad. But what we do see is that this is the last Sagittarius there's going to be for a while. This is the last push, and it's the big one because it's Mars, right? We've got the most fire behind it and cardinal fire behind it. So it also does test us and give us something to push, not so much push against, but to make sure that this is so smoldering hot with Mars behind it that it can't be doused, right? We don't want to be totally just, so disillusioned that we allow our fire to be put out by something so broad and vast that we can't really gather meaning here. So, but again, Jupiter's here. It's fine. It's a management now and a sense of meaning here in this spiritual mission for Gemini, because you're going to need that, because you have to now kind of consent to giving yourself over to the process, because now the North Node is going to be in your 12th house. Uranus is in your 12th house, no stability in your sense of spiritual connection, transcendental connection. So it's very nebulous for Gemini, and it's about to get even more so, I think. So the catharsis, though, is in the 8th house, what you're producing in any relationship that you're in, and what really are those resources that you have accumulated as a result of a shared experience, if they are being transformed as a result of destruction, is your emotional security able to be maintained by what you actually have as your own asset? Whatever that is, that can be financial, energetic, your physical land, your heritage and tradition that you're from. All of those things fit into the 2nd house, Gemini, because that's gonna be important for moving forward especially with Mercury being retrograde during this time as well. You're going to want to know that your emotional, you can turn inward to the core of who you are because you have the resources available to you to maintain that, because there's going to be a cathartic release in this area. And I think some people are so ready for it and other people are like, oh no. So while Mars may be square here, the Sun in Capricorn, so there is a sense of power here with this, will be the sextile to Neptune, right? The very broad humanitarian spiritual mission that Gemini has been, unable to be away from, even though it's not very clear what it is where we can get the real inspiration to work together, and for the Gemini to work in a dynamic interchange with those you are in relationship with, and realize that we all win if we work together. And this really fulfills the spiritual mission, right? This is a moment of like, this is a Lyran connection here, Gemini. So, which is not very Lyran. Gemini is much more Orion. So, but you may find you have Lyran starseed markings, in which case this is going to be really, you can call on that aspect of yourself to really help clarify where you're gathering your power and releasing it from. It's very interesting. So it's about resources, Gemini, and allowing Lilith, this part of who you are, that desperately wants to, it's not even desperate, it's just so powerful. So powerful, she will be heard. So there may be something about you in your persona, in your individual nature, in the person you present to the world as a Gemini, that really needs to be seen and come out, despite like maybe being kind of unpolished or intense for people. But you also have Saturn in your belief system area and your larger perspective that's going to help anchor that and allow it to happen. So Gemini, you should be well versed in your own sense of who you are, in being able to give of yourself, because you know that it's nothing more than a mirror image of who you are. So, but there's a lot of feels going on with all of this too, and resources are the name of the game for the Gemini during this lunar cycle. So Gemini, thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. If you're interested in a reading or more information or how to support this work, you can certainly stick around at the end of this video, or you can access any of the links in the description box below, and it'll give you the information you need. So thank you. I'll see you on the next video. It will be for the Aquarius new moon in February, and or I'll see you on any of the other shows that I post here on BitChute and YouTube, and soon to be Twitch. So love you guys. Thanks for being here. I will see you later, Gemini.